Hey, good morning, everyone. Dr. Joe Ramos here with Joe LoRusso, Ramos Aviation Law. We're here at our home airport, Rocky Mountain Metro.
Beautiful airport at Rocky Mountain Metro.
Beautiful airport, beautiful day. And we thought it was important to speak with you guys about a crash that we discussed last night. It happened at Montgomery County Airport in Maryland. Joe, tell us a little bit about the crash as far as what you know.
Yeah, November 201 Romeo Foxtrot, heading off to drop somebody off, it looks like, according to the ADS-B track, coming back to their home airport. And it looks like they were coming in for a landing on runway 14 when they inadvertently struck some power lines.
Yeah, impressive pictures. I'm sure you guys saw it on national news. It was last night. It was also this morning. The airplane basically hanging from a tower.
Unbelievable photos, really unbelievable photos, and no fatalities.
They sat up there for about 7 hours or so before they were rescued. But as Joe and I were talking, we thought it would be very important to the aviation community to talk about the safety of flying and wire strikes, tower strikes, and also for the general public to maybe understand what pilots know or face when they go into these situations.
Yeah, the airplane itself, chat a little bit about that. It's a Mooney M20J, so it's a low-wing piston airplane. It has a Lycoming engine in there, an IO360, which is not turbocharged. It's not pressurized, so we're talking about a low-level airplane. Okay. It's called the Mooney 201 because Mooney drivers like to express their speed, right? So it's capable of 201 miles per hour is what they say, so pretty quick low-wing airplane.
Fast, common, low-winged airplane. Now, approach speeds on something like that, Joe, I know you've flown all different sorts of airplanes. Any idea about what the approach speed is?
Yeah, most Moonies in the M20Js and the M20Ks are looking at about 80 miles on final. Some guys will back it off to about 71, 76, somewhere in that gap. But you're looking at least from 71 up into 80 there coming over the fence, as we call it.
And the reason I thought that was important to talk about that approach speed is, as Joe mentioned, it looks like, to the best that we can tell right now, that airplane was on approach. It was coming in to land on runway 14. And so on 14, you'd expect the pilot to be slowing down, coming back on the power. And it kind of appeared to be that way, the way it was stuck in that tower. I mean, that obviously didn't hit it going super fast.
Sure, we have the ADS-B track, as I mentioned, and the ADS-B track shows the airplane slowing down. Whether it was slowing down for other conditions, or whether it was slowing down for weather, or whether it was slowing down for approach, that's still unknown, but it definitely looks like it was slowing back and then pitching that deck angle up, which in this case was a 1 in a million to be cradled then by that tower and power lines.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as you come in, let's back up for a second. I'd like to go over a few things that we as pilots look at and a few things that the public might expect in something like this, in a crash like this. So first of all, as a pilot, and the reason I have my iPad up here is that we actually have the plates up, and we'll show those here for you, of what this airport looks like. As a pilot, not only do we have approach plates, those are things we look at that tell us different attitudes, altitudes, kind of a degree that we come down towards the runway at. They tell us decision heights that we have to hit certain points to make decisions if we happen to be flying in weather. But they also give us some landmarks around the area. They'll flag mountains, towers, and so on and so forth. Now, I noticed, Joe, in looking at this, off the end of runway 14, on that approach that we were talking about where it appears he was slowing down, there's some power lines that come across there. They look to me to maybe be a mile and a half off the approach end of the runway. And there's some talk about the towers and lights at the top of towers. Are there frequently lights on towers?
Yeah, anything above 100 feet is going to have a light. Anything above 1,000 feet is going to have multiple lights, and you're exactly right. They're depicted on the tower, not only for safety of pilots, but also for pure identification, what we call piloting, right? Looking for the power lines. And the power lines we know are a little bit north of the runway, so if I look a little bit north of the power lines, there's my runway.
Yes, and we have we get these directories on the facilities on the airports where we're going to go, and they tell us about obstructions, they tell us about towers, and then we also get a thing called NOTAMs. Again, every pilot out there's probably smiling, know what a NOTAM is, but for sake of just the general audience watching, Joe, can you tell us what a NOTAM is?
Yeah, they were noticed to airmen a while back ago, and what it was is things that we should know about going into a field, right? Yes. Is there a runway closure? Is the approach out of use? Is there a taxiway closure? Are there certain procedures that we now have to fly because of whatever reason? Yes. They've recently transitioned to notice to air missions, and I think you looked at, were there some NOTAMs on this airport coming in?
Yeah, there were, interesting enough, and we actually have a friend coming by in his jet right now, so it gets a little loud. We apologize. In any case, I did look at the NOTAMs on this, and there were some out, and they were actually on the towers. So these towers we're talking about, they're on the approaching the runway coming in. There were notices to airmen there saying, look, these lights are out. They tell the height of the tower, they tell that the light is out, and they warn us of that. And I know as a practice, I as a pilot always look at the NOTAMs, always look at the field I'm going into. What do you think about the safety aspects of those NOTAMs?
Really, really important and often disregarded. Really important to look at, but nowadays with ForeFlight and all the software, the flight planning software that we have, it's nice because there is a focus on that, right? When you file your flight plan from A to B, those mapping programs will pop up NOTAM warnings for each location and en route.
Yeah, they do. They pop right up on the pilot apps, and that's so helpful because you just get your attention drawn right to it. And I think as we looked at this particular crash, there are a few things I want to talk about with crashes in general. There are over 70 airplanes a year that strike either towers or lines. In your experience of power lines and such, where do you see most of these type of strikes occur? Are they near airports? Are they tips of mountains, valleys, rivers? When do you see them?
Yeah, commonly these strikes occur when an airplane is on an approach, right? They're looking at a runway, looking at whether they can land on that runway, and there's a natural pilot instinct to kind of sneak a little bit lower to make sure that we hit the start of that runway and we have adequate braking room. So much so that that's an emphasis area for the FAA this year in 2022 going into 2023 is what's called a stabilized approach. Making sure that everything is configured there as you're on your way down towards the runway with an adequate glide slope like you mentioned without having to change it vertically or speed back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely critical. And you know, these strikes are occurring on these approaches. The other place that we frequently will see strikes occur are pilots that are kind of showboating sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Flying low level. I know you fly a Cub a lot as part of your fun, and that's an area there's a lot of these strikes, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we've certainly seen our fair share in our community.
Airplanes that fly low, you know, doing the wing wag, again, maybe a little distraction. Joe mentioned distraction when you're looking at the runway coming in on an approach if there's something before it. Also the distraction if you're showing off for someone or, you know, kind of showing them what your airplane will do. And then what about the agricultural industry? These guys fly pretty aggressive near a lot of lines.
Yeah, the public will be amazed to learn that a lot of those guys have balled up airplanes, have hit power lines. It's very common for them to stay what we call map of the earth flying, right on top of the corn rows. And when they look at a power line, it's above or below, it's going to be below 9 times out of 10. But they fly with a full roll cage, a helmet. So it's not uncommon to see a power line strike in that community, but fatalities are uncommon.
And one of the things about those pilots, Joe, when they're flying, now they're seeing a lot. And in this particular case, I think you looked up the weather at Montgomery County Airport. What'd you see?
Yeah, it was progressively getting worse. So when the airplane left, it was VFR conditions or visual flight rules, right? The pilot's able to take off, look around, see the ground, see landmarks, make it to his destination, come on back. When he was coming back, the weather had progressed into IFR, instrument flight rules, right?
Yes.
Where it can no longer see the ground, perhaps, can no longer see out in front. Went from 10 miles of visibility down to 1.5 miles.
Wow.
And then it went to a ceiling of essentially unlimited down to 200 feet.
Wow, 200 feet. And the towers in this, as Joe mentioned, I looked up the towers that were there that are very near this airport that have these power lines on them. And the towers seem to range from maybe as low as 170 feet to the top of one of them. Another one I think goes up to about 260. There are multiple of them along this area. So we're talking towers that sound like they're right at what the ceiling is, basically, of visibility.
Absolutely, yeah, you're right.
And so in winding this up today, we'll keep today short and simple. This is fresh. This crash is probably 12 to 16 hours old here when we're talking right now. There's still a lot to learn, but a few things that strike me are, number one, we've got towers and power lines near the approach end of a runway. Sounds like the pilot probably should have been aware of those.
Yeah, you would think so with all the indications on the charts and the NOTAMs.
So a couple things you could have checked, charts and NOTAMs. And he very well may have another thing that may come into play here. We may learn through further investigation, visibility.
Yeah.
The weather, as you mentioned. I think another thing that Joe mentioned that's important here in this particular case with the survival of the two occupants is airplane speed.
Yeah, it looks like it's one of those 1 in a million, right? The speed was back enough, the deck angle was up enough that it just kind of cradled itself right there into that tower. Wow. Really, really unbelievable. A big, thank you for that one, right? That everybody's still alive.
Yeah, unbelievable. And those power lines were obviously powered, and I think that was a lot of the weight was trying to get some of that grounded. and such. So Joe, any particular learning lessons, anything jumps to your mind here? We've talked a little bit about lighting, we've talked about the position of wires, approaches of airplanes, we talked about the airplane itself and the speed, we talked about the weather, the clouds, IFR conditions, maybe past the early. Anything else jump out to you that would be good for the audience?
The one thing that I'll add is the FAA teaches a number of cautionary tales for pilots where they tend to get in trouble. And one of the cautionary warnings is get their itis. I think we've all heard that term in the pilot community. It's a disease invented by the FAA, but it is true where, you know, you're on a timeline, you've got to drop this person off, they got to be at work before 8, and you're looking at the weather and you're thinking, I don't know that I should do it. My rule of thumb, and I'm sure you have your own as well, but mine is if I second guess myself 3 times, it's 3 strikes and you're out. So if the weather looks bad and I'm saying, I don't know that I should go, there's 1 strike right there. And if I add it up to 3, that airplane's staying in the hangar regardless of the obligations.
Boy, that's a great personal rule to have, 3 strikes. And I do have my own as well. I set personal minimums with what I will fly into and what I won't, period. And I adhere to those. If I have another very experienced pilot with me, then I might expand my curve, so to say. If I was flying with you, for example, I would expand my curve a touch. But without that, there are just certain things, certain days I just won't take off. I just won't do it. And it's for this very reason. It appears with this airplane and with this pilot on this day, it was changing conditions. And we're fortunate in that we're able to whip out these iPads and look at weather. And it doesn't only give us the weather right now, at where we're at and where we're going. Again, we're both going to go fly after this. It gives us what the weather's going to be like when we get there, time ahead. And I find it to be very accurate.
Yeah, I do as well. We've come leaps and bounds.
Yeah, so in this case, again, still a lot left to learn. We're going to show you some of these plates as part of this video. You can see the power lines that we're talking about, the heights, and some of these NOTAMs that were out there. And then it'll be interesting to see what further investigation shows.
Absolutely. Thank you guys very much. Thank you, Dr. Ramos.
Thanks a lot. It's always good doing these with you, Joe.
Pleasure.
Yep. Take care.